Imagine just suddenly being up from out of nowhere. No memory, no understanding, no beginning, no end. You just are eternal. Had you words to express yourself at the moment, you might say something along the lines of, I am that I am. Although it really wouldn't mean much of anything, who would you be talking to? In order for the variable of who to be put into play, one must apply a certain frame of reference that you, at this point, simply do not possess. You just exist. Amidst nothing else, you are utterly alone. Or are you? Because you exist. In being something, you must be defined, right? And a thing cannot be used to define itself. Just as a word cannot be used in its own definition, it simply wouldn't make any sense. Any given thing in the absence of any other thing is no thing. That which is in the absence of that which is not is not. 1 plus 1 equals 0. But that one that you are does indeed exist, and therefore it is very heavily implied that there must be something other than you existing as well. Now, in this realization, you bring into being a divine dichotomy. That which is exists, therefore that which is not must also exist. It's not possible for it to be any other way, really, and possibility has to be in play in order for any of it to be happening, right? So in this, you have a concept of reflection. You're capable of reflecting upon yourself and whatever else it is that does in fact exist. You're capable of initiating a reflection. In that reflection, you have effectively created 1 second to work with, one other. In that second, miraculous things happen. You exist, you're thinking, you're being, I think, therefore I am, and that's what you are, I am, being. So I have thoughts or some sort of psychic mental constructions, and thereby I have memory. Memory comes into play. In having separate, isolated memories, gravity comes into play. Pieces are being held together, things are being isolated, fractured, separated. I'm capable of, in some ways, dismantling myself, whatever I am. And in examining these pieces reflecting upon each other, we have relativity. And in that, the fundamental elements of existence are put into play, and the stage for the game is effectively set. You now have gravity, memory, and relativity to work with. And without anybody setting any rules upon you, telling you what you are not, can or cannot be, nothing limiting you other than your own imagination, you are free to create as you please, and the emptiness of forever awaits for you to make use of. And there you are, essentially eternal, with what seems like a piece of time to play with, and these three fundamental tools you can use to pretty much do whatever the fuck you want to. Hold that thought for just an eternity. In our principal dynamics series or course, we have gone over several different concepts that could seemingly be somewhat new to people, although they're simple, basic fundamentals of life. We just use certain terminologies, values, and aspects. Values being concrete meanings behind things, or perhaps not concrete, but for all certainty, relative meanings behind things, aspects being subjective connotations that are added to things, implications of a thing, whatever it may be. And we've also discussed the idea of artifacts. There are prime values we've talked about in that course that are overall spheres of influence that kind of inform the entirety of society. These catalyst events, as we've called them, are to be regarded as artifacts of the first cause, which the first cause would be that divine dichotomy. That which is, in the absence of that which is not, therefore that which is exists. There must be something else, and we have a split, we have an initial reflection. Reflection being the primary element of all things. That's the one thing that truly exists, is reflection. And beyond that, we're free to do as we please. We create three tools to make use of: memory, gravity, relativity, and we use those essentially to design physics, which comes into play as the ultimate physical construct. Our existence concept is physics, and it's ruled by those three elements that we use to create it. Now, the artifacts that we've spoken to are remnants left over from a cause, from an initial value that fractures into many pieces, and it moves all over the place, and it has different meanings for different people, but ultimately there's going to be some particularities to it. I suppose you could say there's going to be, as I've mentioned, spectacles in the last video, sort of lenses through which we view things. I've used the reference of, insofar as sexuality is concerned, we have religion, which is a catalyst event. That's a prime artifact. Attached to that, we have several implications and aspects that stretch out into the other spheres of influence, such as sexuality being another catalyst event. And the way that they reflect upon each other in many instances is, as I've set the example for the LGBT community, for people to have a value in their mind that makes them feel in some way ashamed of being what they are, or at least ashamed of expressing it outright. This is because of the reflective relativity between these two catalyst events. They create an aspect that hangs on. That's what an artifact is. It's a leftover remnant of a cause that doesn't really work so well. It serves no purpose, it's of no use to us, but we still have it hanging around. Thereby, it is an artifact. And the catalyst events themselves are artifacts of the initial first cause, that first reflection, the 1 second that we created, or that we are in the process of creating still. So, we want to try throughout this course to examine these artifacts, most especially religion, but the way that it reflects upon other artifacts, and the artifacts inherent in religion as a catalyst event would be what we're really exploring. But in order to continue this investigation from that first person perspective, we need that essential spectacle of first personality. We have to have a clear-cut path to get back to where we came from, so that we don't lose track of who and what we really are. And that's what the scratch maneuver is for. We move outward toward the edges of comprehension in our investigation using key questions. That's going to be the primary path that we are going to take, that we're going to consistently use, is fundamental existential questions, such as who am I? Who am I is essentially answered in every second by who you decide to be, what your choices are. But then there are other ones that stretch further outward. That one hangs in the core, that belongs to you. But there are others that stretch further outward into our construct, such as where am I? What time is it? if we have time, what is the time? If we are in a place, where is it? Well, the time is always going to be now. No changing that. No matter what, time is now. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, you cannot get out of here. You will always be here. You can't even try to leave here. It's impossible for you to even make an attempt at approaching the suggestion. There's no way for you to escape being right here, right now. See, there's nothing beyond that. That answer to that existential question is as far as our comprehension goes. We know that that is the boundary, as it is evidenced by there being a lack of anything beyond or outside of it. It's impossible to get away from that answer. That is the one rock solid, always will be perfect answer to that question. Now plus here equals nowhere. That's kind of a little triggering cue. That's, I suppose you could say, almost like a practical joke, really, in our language and in our understanding, in our comprehension. But of course, it's not really a joke. It is reality. We are nowhere. We are up from out of nowhere. We just come from nothing. We are, I am that I am, and in the absence of that which is not, I am not. Therefore, I am technically nothing. It is impossible for me to exist. It's impossible for any of this to exist, yet it does. We get back towards the boundary and we reach that core spot there, nowhere, by observing these parameters, these reaches of our understanding. And there are many, many more. They're all over the place, and we'll get into some of them later on, but we need to keep that scratch maneuver in mind, as that's our path home. That's how we can consistently remember where we came from and what we're actually doing. We are nowhere, and what we do have to work with is of our own creation. So we are free to do as we please. We are simply reflecting upon the void, or rather, the void itself is reflecting upon us in some way. The only other is our reflection. Now, that, of course, is in some slight way a somewhat subjective perception, because we could easily question, is there really something else? Is there something beyond the boundary? Do we exist as a part of something else, which of course we very likely do, as a situation is largely cosmological. Um, an impulse cannot exist without a point of origin. We have to keep that in mind. That's how experimentation works. That's how science works, cause and effect. Although we're going to find throughout our exploration that cause and effect aren't necessarily moving in that order, that we do in fact perceive things in reverse. We perceive things inverted. Our perception of time is inverted, and that's going to be another filter through which we view these things. And of course, as I've said before, we have to add on the filter of human nature, human rationality. But for the time being, let's just work with what we have there and keep that in mind. That's where we're looking at things from. Now here equals nowhere. We are nowhere. We came up from out of nowhere. We exist as whatever we reflect upon ourselves as being. Who I am is simply whoever I choose to be right now and here. So that's what we're going to want to keep in mind as we begin to examine these catalyst events and the artifacts that are attached to them. For now, as I said, just kind of dwell on that for a bit. Anyways, thank you for this time. Very happy to get this course started. Love you guys. Kila Salai, Terve Uni Siari. Namaste.